I'm Michael Lynch, and welcome back to the Men Seeking Freedom podcast. We are both a podcast and a community of men. And you can often recognize the man that's appropriate for this community by being someone who's been established in their life in many different areas, but may have something inside them that makes them a little bit uneasy. And it's not always a gift of theirs to be able to articulate their feelings about things. That's the type of person we love to have in this community. That's who our speakers talk to when they speak. And so that's where we're at. And today, very excited to have Eddie Francis join us. Eddie is a communications strategist and speaker joining us from the greater New Orleans area. Really honored to have you, Eddie. Please introduce yourself to this community.
Thank you so much, Michael. Yeah, I'm born and raised in New Orleans, man. I was born uptown New Orleans. I grew up in the heart of New Orleans, dare I say, in the heart of Mardi Gras. There's a big popular parade called Zulu that ended a few blocks from my house. And so I grew up in the middle of revelry, good food, good people, love and laughter. And that has what shaped a lot of my life. I graduated from college in New Orleans and I started my career in New Orleans. I started in radio, which I still do radio work. I have a weekly show that I do called The Way Forward. And my career has not only been in broadcasting, but a chunk of my career has been in higher education, communications, and marketing. I've been in talent acquisition as well. And now I'm on my own, being a communication strategist. I'm a speaker. And so that is what a lot of my life is about. I'm married to a wonderful woman. I have a great son, crazy about the kid, and a dog and a cat.
A household of five. Okay.
I'm a
You
dog daddy and a cat daddy.
got That's great. I love it's just nice to hear the enthusiastic way you made those references. This is not a Debbie Downer moment. I'm divorced. It's been a while. And so one of the things I found as a divorced man is I really pay close attention to anyone who sounds like they're in a healthy, happy relationships. Good for you. Good for you for leading with that. And again, in this men's community, it's nice to have that particular perspective. One of the things I know, which is a real area of expertise for you, is in personal leadership. Leadership, as if you ask 100 people, what does it mean to be a leader? There's a lot of different ways, a lot of different aspects of life, and a lot of ways you can go about
Yeah.
defining it. Since it's a centerpiece with what you do, give us a sense of what personal leadership is.
So first of all, if it makes you feel any better, Michael, this is wife number two. So been there, done
Yeah.
that.
What did they say? What if I didn't invent the saying? If at first you don't succeed,
Try
try
again,
again.
man. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Personal leadership is personal growth and development, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. And the way that I even came to personal leadership, I was really pushed in a recent situation, a past job that I had, where I was working with this CEO. I was doing marketing and communications for him. And this was their first CEO job. And only a month into the job, this CEO tells me one day, we we got to work on my personal brand. And I said, but you just got here. Like you don't even know what you have as far as the organization is concerned. You barely know the people. You don't know where you are. And so I told them, listen, if you do a great job at this, the personal brand is going to follow. So they didn't appreciate it, but it really made me realize that there is this big gap in leadership where a lot of times, and this wasn't the first person I had heard say something like this, and it made me realize that there are so many people who get so worried about themselves and they want to know how they look. They want to know how they look doing it, and they want credit for things that they just completely missed that if they can get themselves together doing the internal work, then everything else is going to fall in place. And it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be mistakes made. But if you really keep yourself centered, if you really dedicate yourself to your personal growth and development, not just for yourself, but if you dedicate your personal growth and development to making sure that other people around you are okay, it's almost like the safety presentation on an airplane before you take a flight, where they say, put your own oxygen mask on before you put someone else's oxygen mask on. You and I've thank goodness I've never been in this situation, but and I hope never to be in a situation, but I can only imagine that if it gets to that point, you have to be really composed, you have to be calm, you have to move pretty well, and you just have to just have your mind quieted enough so that you can grab that oxygen mask, get it on yourself, and then have the presence of mind to help the person next to you if they need that kind of help. That's what personal leadership is to me. And that's the way I came into it with this experience. That's this experience with this CEO just pushed me in that direction. And that's why it's become so important to me. And I've also worked with a bunch of people who have taken care of themselves. They have, excuse me, they've taken care of themselves spiritually, personally, physically, emotionally, mentally, even as far as their diet is concerned. And I've seen the results of how they work with other people, those positive results. And so that's why personal leadership means so much to me. And that's why it's a part of the work that I do in communication strategy, as a husband, as a father, when I'm doing a radio show. That's why it means so much to me.
Okay, so just unpacking that too. So it's like the two-step process is the first step is how do I personally grow myself?
Yeah.
And then how do I do it in a way that benefits the appropriate people that are throughout my life? So it's based on starting, what are just, so, as someone who reads a lot, studies a lot of different things that I'm passionate about, I always like to keep track of that as me having a coach. Those are
Hmm.
ways where I'm trying to grow personally. What is some general advice for the person who he doesn't get up in the morning and say, I don't know if I have a personal growth plan the way that Eddie mentioned it in the podcast. What do you suggest for people, or just even things to think about at that step?
Yeah. For me, and I'll use myself as an example. I have a therapist who I see regularly. The way I even got to even looking for a therapist was me telling myself one day, I don't feel like myself. And maybe, and at the time, I didn't even know what that was, but I just knew that I didn't feel right. At the time, I was always angry about stuff. I was easily annoyed about a lot of things. Physically, I wasn't in very good shape, but I really hated this feeling of just feeling tense all the time. It just didn't make sense to me. And I started to think back to when I was a kid and I was a teenager. I was in college. I was laughing all the time, just having a good time all the time. Into my 20s, into my first job, I was like that. But then by the time I was at the end of my 20s, I know that that's when I noticed the shift. And so I would say for someone who is really looking to engage in personal leadership, asking themselves, do you feel like yourself? Or are you truly happy with what you hear coming out of your mouth, with the thoughts that are swimming around in your mind? Because I imagine for a lot of people, they will tell you that they're happy, but they're not really happy. I think there's a whole lot of that these days, so much of it. And I think there are so many people who they are so consumed with wanting to be right. Everything to them is about having the right answer. And so if you ask them, hey, I'll never forget when people were saying, if you really want to feel good and somebody asks you how your day is going, you say, my day is going great. And then it's going to be a great day. Maybe it's a nice way to try to challenge yourself to have a great day. But if you're not really having a great day, if the day sucks, and you're telling people you're having a great day. To me, my experience is that makes it worse. So I've
In this,
spent,
in
yeah,
talking,
go ahead. Go ahead.
no, the only point I want to make, piggybacking on that, is we're, I think our society, don't get me wrong, it's nice to put on an exterior of things are fine in relation to how they could be. But I think our society, and definitely with men, we need more authentic, intimate conversations
Yeah.
about our feelings. And you had said, you were basically asking yourself, how do you feel about yourself? That's like high end, mature self-awareness, especially if you're going to allow yourself to give an honest answer in return, which
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
would, and by the way, I give a shout out to everybody who talks about therapy, because in this, everyone's personal leadership, personal growth strategy, in my opinion, should involve that unbiased conversation. Best thing I learned at age 30, old girlfriend, ex-girlfriend introduced me to therapy. Michael, Bob was his name, changed my life. Michael, you come here because your mother loves you, your friends love you. Hopefully today your girlfriend loves you. They're all biased in a
Yeah.
good way. It's good. That's good bias. You can't have enough loving people. But as therapy can get to into growth and leadership, because we're going to just really hash out what's really happening.
Yeah. And the thing is, one of the reasons I think therapy can be so hard for people, especially men, is it undresses you emotionally. And that is the most uncomfortable feeling. I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting there talking to my therapist and I'm saying to myself, I really don't want to talk about this. But I have to. I know I have to. And I'm not going to sit there and say after I talk, I just felt so free. I'm not going to say I just felt so free after I talked about it. But I did feel as if I accomplished something. I did feel better. I did feel as if it was out there. Okay, fine. I put it out there. It's on the table. I need to go ahead and figure out what I'm going to do with it and what I'm going to do about it. It still feels it still sucks. It still sucks that I had to talk about that difficult thing because for me, for instance, one of the most difficult conversations I've had with my therapist, and I don't mind talking about this because my parents passed away when I was 29 and 34. So my mother passed away when I was 29, my dad 34. My mother never got to see her grandchild. She never got to meet my son. My dad held my son for a grand total of a few minutes or something like that. And so my son doesn't have the benefit of knowing his grandparents, at least not my parents. And so one of the most difficult conversations I had with my therapist was about the feelings about my parents having passed and just not dealing with the grief. So we're talking about over 20 years. I just never dealt with the grief of it. That was an extraordinarily uncomfortable conversation with me. It was one I didn't want to have. But after I had the conversation and I let everything out about it, just this deluge of emotions, once I let that out, I realized, okay, I can move on now. I can move on to something else. Not that I just forgot about what happened or forgot about my feelings. Those feelings are all still there. And for context, my older brother and sister, my sister is 13 years older than I am. My brother's 8 years older than I am. They had great quality time with my parents. They got to spend great adult time with them. They got great advice from my parents about being married and about being parents. And I missed all of that. And excuse me. So that was something that I had to figure out, but I had to do that difficult conversation. And I didn't, of course, I didn't want to do the whole crying thing,
Hold your
but
thought for hold
mm,
you. I want to listen to your words. I had to. Technically, it didn't have to. Why did you? I'm glad you did. Why did you feel you had to?
I had to do it for me. That's the thing. That's why I say I had to, because it was necessary for me to put it was necessary for me to put my behavior my feelings about the world, and a lot of other things in context. Because remember, I had this thing in the back of my head saying, you don't feel like yourself. You don't feel right. Yeah, it's nice to be cynical, and sometimes you can crack the best jokes when you're the angry guy in the room and all that other good stuff. You can be entertaining by being the angry guy in the room, but it didn't do anything for me.
Mm.
It did something for other people. Like there was a sportscaster at one of the radio stations I worked at. Guy was really great. Loved working with him, and I really wanted to work with him. He said, "Hey, why don't you do me a favor? Do a commentary about something, and then also do a report as if you had a Pelicans game or something like that." I was like, "Great." So I did the basketball sideline report. I did a mock report, and then I did the commentary. And I don't remember what the commentary was, but whatever it was, I had this angry guy thing going. So I'm sick of that. So I had that whole thing. And he said, the sideline report, it was good. It was okay. Oh, but I love that angry guy thing that you did. I want angry Eddie. And I was like, yeah, but I can't do that all the time, man. I'm gonna get a headache. Like that's a lot happening for me to do this almost on a daily basis. Man, I can't do that. And like I said, it was funny that one time.
Yeah.
It was great for an audition, but when I thought about it, do I really want to do that every day? Even if it was every week, I just couldn't take it every week. Yeah, so yeah, I think for a guy who is really trying to figure out where to get the journey started, I really think it's important for him to ask himself that honest question about whether or not he feels right, and then also whether or not whether or not he feels like himself, and whether or not he actually likes what's going through his head.
Does he like himself? You know what
Hard
word you,
question.
the way you put that all together, you didn't use a word that goes right with it is alignment.
Hmm.
I've been reading, I'm reading a book now called Lies Men Believe.
That
It's,
sounds deep.
I consider it good homework for what I do for a living. And it's also, if you're honest with yourself, you relate to a lot of the things in there, but lies men believe. But the word alignment comes up a lot. And one of the things this, I believe the author in this book brought up was, and here's another high level introspective exercise. Just write down the 4 or 5 values that are most prevalent in your life. And
Yes.
and I think the point the author was making was you'll learn a lot about alignment or lack of if you start to say, wow, I believe in this and this. And there's not a lot of that showing up in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. So the last full-time job that I had was back in April of 2023. That was when it ended. And my wife was asking me, "What do you want to do next?" We talked and talked, and she said, "Why don't you really focus on what it is that you truly want to do?" And so that's when I decided to form a business. And as I'm really thinking through this business idea, the idea is there. It hit me though as I was doing this. I'm like, I'm going to be a solopreneur for a long time, probably. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hire anybody anytime soon. So I need to get used to the fact that it's going to be me. And I realized if that's the case, the business necessarily won't be the brand. I'm going to be the brand. So I'm reaching into my own marketing bag of tricks. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be the brand. So I'm thinking, if I'm going to be the brand, then I really got to get my stuff together. And I really have to make sure that what I am, as the product, I have to make sure that what I'm doing is accurate, it connects, it aligns, all that good stuff. And so I actually spent 2 weeks journaling, writing about what it is that I truly believed in, why I wanted to do what I wanted to do, why it was so important to me. But the other thing that was really important to me was that I followed a marketing plan. I created a personal mission, personal vision, and personal values. The part that really brought it all together for me were the personal core values. And when I got that part figured out, then I realized, okay, great. this is what I'm going to do. This is the direction I'm going to set sail in. This is how this is going to work out for me. And yeah, I'll be good once I get all of this stuff together. And things started to make sense. I had a couple of ideas that I wanted to do for the business, and I'm going, this doesn't align with my values. This doesn't align with the mission. It sounds like a good idea now, but yeah, I'm going to jump into this thing and I'm going to realize this isn't really what I want to do. And heaven forbid if it takes off and I start making some really good money and now I'm stuck doing this thing that I really don't believe in and I really don't want, and it doesn't get me up in the morning. It's not a problem that keeps me up at night. And you're right. Just having those personal values understood and mapped out for yourself. I mean, that is extraordinarily important to develop a sense of personal leadership.
You glossed over a part that is ingrained in who you are, but I've got to call it out as someone who's not you.
Uh-huh.
Your wife actually said to you, do something that you truly want to do.
Yeah.
I think that's I don't know anything about you and your marriage. I don't want to mislead this audience, but I think this is a men's podcast, and men are often in relationships of all different shapes and sizes. You and I were joking before we even started recording this about really paying attention to what people say that they may not even be paying attention to. I pay attention to when people say things like what you just did, because I'll I'll show you a strong man when I can show you a good, strong woman, standing with him and encouraging him to find his as a because as Eddie, think about the alternatives. Get out there, damn it, and make some money for us. Get out there. You're not supposed to. I always like you're not supposed to like your job necessarily. You've got to. It's important to be the head of the household and be a responsible person. But boy, I love it when there's a promotion of chase what it is that you're all about.
Oh, listen, no, Michael, no, when I tell you she's the real MVP, she is the real MVP because
Put her on, for crying out loud. We
I
need
swear, yeah, I know. You know what? So I actually do. So I have been working. There's been a bit of a dip in my business, so I've been really working through that. So I'm working on all these proposals, getting these proposals out to companies and to folks and picking up all these small jobs along the way. And at one point I thought, okay, I probably was time for me to look for a full-time job and keep this on the side if that can work. And so I did. I looked for a couple of things. So there was one interview that I did, and she asked me, how did it go? And I said, I think it went okay. I'm not exactly sure. We'll see, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, if it's for you, it's for you. We'll see. Let's see how it goes. How's the business going? This is what's happening. And so we're eating dinner, and I looked at her and I said, thank you so much for not riding my back to get out there and to go get a job. Thank you. I was like, you have no idea what a relief it is to not have you saying, all right, okay, it's time. It's time to go out there and bring home some bacon. We got 2 strips of bacon. I need you to bring home 5. And I meant that because, and she goes, that's not going to make things any better. I said, you have no earthly idea how rare you are. I said, you just have no idea. Because Mike, I have dated the other type. and so I have been there. I have been there. I've done that. I bought the t-shirt. The last job, this will make it even better for you. The last job I had, she just knew that, she knew it wasn't going to work out. She knew before I knew it wasn't going to work out. And so she goes, at one point, she goes, you might want to start thinking about your exit plan. And I said, I don't want to do that because I want to hold on. I said, I want to do this job through this date. So I had a date set up that I was going to. And so I started setting up the exit plan. I started organizing files and all kinds of things for the person who would come after me. And I'm doing all this stuff. One day things came to a head. My boss and I got into it, and my boss decided I had to go. And
The exit plan moved up.
it did. It moved up on me by about a month. The day it happened, I called my wife and I said, yeah, so today is my last day. And she goes, all right, come home. And so I get home and there was a bottle of champagne. And she was like, you know what? That place was holding you back. And
Does your wife have her own couples counseling or advisement business that'd be opening up very soon? That's just one man's opinion from a long distance away. But what a nice, just a quick interjection because this still is, it's about
yeah,
you here. But one of the things I'm learning in Men Seeking Freedom and talking to the great guests I've had so far is I'm starting to think to myself, in spite of not being a relationship expert, I'm finding a lot of the times the conversations I'll have with the people speaking with really pivot around relationship
yeah.
and strength of, and what is it rooted in, and
Hmm.
how do you actually talk to each other, and why is it there? And there's, we're not saying anything's perfect or anything like that, but you've just sprinkled in some things here to where I'm sitting just back going, if any guys watching this, may they be in a similar type relationship,
Yeah,
but it's just,
absolutely. Oh man, I root for guys to be because yeah, I want men to be accountable, but I'm saying by the same token, it can be hard. It can be hard. I know that people have their opinions about men's place in the world, blah, 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 and all that other stuff. It can still be hard because here's the other side of that. The other side of that is we both got married to each other a little later than usual for most people. And she sometimes she'll say, "Oh man, I really wish we had met in college." And I'm going, "Oh, but you didn't want to meet that version." No, no, no. Oh, you met the right version.
that was a broken down old car back then.
Oh no. Oh no. No, it was a car. It was a car that revved way too high. It liked to weave, bob
Yeah.
and weave in and out of traffic and
Uh,
drive on the shoulder. That car was no.
you have a good imagination in how you explain that.
Oh no, you know what? Because and I told this, and this goes back to my real concern about people having a sense of personal leadership. I told her, I said, I would not have been ready for you earlier. There's just no way because I had to understand things. I had to understand things about myself. I had to grow up. I had to let things go. I had to gain some things. There was just a lot that needed to happen. And one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got from anybody was it was great relationship advice. This person said, oh, and I really wish I could remember who told me this, but they said, listen, Eddie, whatever you don't try to win every argument. And that didn't make sense to me at the time. I'm like, yeah, but if I'm right, I'm right. Okay. So that's why I'm arguing because I'm the one who's right. And it made zero sense to me. And they said, well, when you argue with people, it's important to understand why the other person is arguing. And when I heard that, I said, okay, all right, fine. I guess you have a point.
Yeah.
That was a very hard concession for me.
And from that point on, you said I'll win 98% of them. Is that how you,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that where you moved to or what?
Yes.
How mature of you?
Yeah, yeah. I was like, oh, okay, all right, fine. I'll concede 2%, but those other 90%, I'm right, I'm right. But it really resonated once I got into the relationship with Halima, my wife. And once I was listening to her, I said we were about to get into an argument, and I'm going, okay, so what are you upset about again? And so I shifted from this is why I'm right and you're wrong to why are you upset again? Because I had to, because I'm listening to her and I'm going, well, I don't understand what's happening here. And I said, okay, so why are you upset again? And she didn't like the again part, but she did like that I stopped and asked. And so that was the victory there for me was the fact that I was able to stop myself and then understand. But that came also from developing this sense of personal leadership because not only was it a personal growth and development moment for me, but it was also something that helped her. And the way it helped is that I gained more of her trust. And so that was a really important point for me. Yeah.
How did you, since I asked this selfish question, how did you meet your current wife?
Oh, taboo story, man, at work.
Is we don't want to get any, we don't want to raise any legal issues here.
Ah, nah, statute of limitations is up. So here's the deal. So,
You were off the company. What was it? Fishing off the company pier or one of those things, right?
yeah. No, I got laid off from that job. She got let go from it. Now, we both got let go around the same time anyway.
Oh, okay.
So what happened was we were at a work function and I saw her across the room and I was like, whoa, who is that? And I went to go introduce myself. What I did not know was that I was supposed to contact her because I was the director of communications for this company. She came in, well, it was a college. I was the director of communications. She came in to actually start a center for fundraising and philanthropy. I saw her information and I was like, oh man, this is really impressive. But I hadn't seen her information before the day I met her. And so when I went to go introduce myself, she looks at me, she stands back on one leg and looks at me and goes, "Oh, you're Eddie Francis." And I was like, "Whoa." I said, "Oh, did we meet in college or something? Whoa, what's the deal?" As it turns out, she told me you were supposed to contact me about the work I'm doing, and I didn't get the same message that she got. So that's what that was about. But yeah, we met at work and we went along our merry way and we grew
That's
to
great.
become really good friends.
That's really cool. Love that. As someone who's slaving on online dating sites, which is a whole nother podcast I'll be starting in the near future. I think it's nice to know that there's spontaneous interactions like that lead to something of that. That's still, by the way, Eddie, in spite of all the hundreds of billions of dollars that Match and other websites have made in the dating world, the best way to meet somebody is still, even in a innocent situation like that where that wasn't the setup for it, you had an opportunity to size up a lot of, I don't want to get into dating advice here, but you got a chance to see who she was just from just a pure raw, do I like the idea of interacting with this person on any level at all?
No, so Michael, here's the funny thing though. I had been on dating sites when I met her. That's the funny part. So I had been doing the online dating thing, and she was the one person I met in person. And so that was
You can
that's how
figure
it
out the
worked.
formula that went into all that brought you together. You got to market that. And
Oh yeah, it
so,
was just the way I planned it. Wonk
so,
wonk.
so you've touched on the support you got
Yeah.
for being an entrepreneur by your wife, and you've talked a little bit about what you're doing, communication strategy, and also a speaker. So yeah, bring us up to what is it now, early 2026 here? What is it that's you want the audience to know that's really important about the work you're doing today that they could potentially inquire about?
What's important about it is that usually the gap between leadership and the organization accomplishing what it needs to accomplish is communication. I actually just had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday who works at a university going through a change, and he's really discouraged, and all these people are saying, yeah, this might be the strategic plan, but I'm about to exercise my options and I'm getting out of here because they're not getting a whole lot of communication from the leader. And so, at least that's what he said. And so, communication is extraordinarily important when it comes to the relationship between the leader and their people, whether it's from an organizational level, a team level. But then, excuse me, the other part of it is that it's important to think about the quality of communication. And I think that's what's important for people to understand as well. It's one thing to say, we're doing a good job, see you at work tomorrow. But it's another thing to say, you are doing an excellent job. And because of what you're doing, this is where we are. And I can't wait for us to get back at it tomorrow. Those are they're the same message, but they have different frameworks. And so that's the that's what's important about the work that I do. In speaking, really harp a lot on understanding leadership as a process and then also understanding it as something that is people centered. And this really seeps its way into my communication strategy work as well. It's very important for me for people to understand that because I have seen so many leaders who think that leader is this stagnant thing. Leadership is this stagnant thing. It's the title, it's the job, it's this, that, and the other. But it's a process because something is going to always change. People are going to change. The environment is going to change, right? But then you got to remember, to me, you got to remember leadership is being people centered. You can't lead rocks, you can't lead wood, you can't lead data. You have to lead people. And it's amazing to me how many people who are in extraordinarily important positions who forget that there are people that they're dealing with, especially when there's a major change and there's a change in leadership and people are terrified for their jobs. They're terrified about what's going to happen next. They're terrified about what this next leader is going to do because they want to know what's going to happen to them. And that's where communication loops right back in to be able to keep those lines of communication open so that people understand the deal. And listen, if it's bad news you got to give everybody, give people the bad news, man. Rip the band-aid off. Let them exercise their own options. Let them do what they have to do. But please communicate it and please communicate it clearly. And I think it should be communicated quickly in those cases. But yeah, that's why I tend to obsess about communication a lot of times. I have been that person who has been just terrified for my job. I've been that person who's been walking around trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do next. And I do something, everybody goes, that was the wrong thing. And I'm going, I had no idea what to do because nothing was clear. So I just did what I thought I was doing. You gave me a blank check. I wrote my name and $1 million on the check. And so here we are. But yeah, that kind of work is really important to me.
When I was formulating the strategy behind men seeking freedom, and as I shared with you earlier, this woman challenged me about who do I think I could coach the best. And when I said to her, I want to work with men, and because I've been divorced, I've gone through loss, I've one of the terms that kind of popped out to me, which you're touching on, is what's another thing that shut men up? Career satisfaction and identity. Now, if you're in a great job or a great
Mm,
career, you may have different problems you deal with that, but hey, this is what I'm meant to be doing, blah, 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 blah. But I spent a lot of years in my career, Eddie, in sales.
yeah.
Michael, you have the great personality for sales. Now, I'm not blaming it on other people because I chose to follow directives people gave me. There was some of the most challenging moments of my life
Mm,
were making decisions about staying or going from
mm,
places. And I'll tell you something, and this was obviously when I was younger, that totally ate me alive.
yeah.
On the men don't quit. Why
Mm,
aren't you being successful in an environment where other people are being successful? All this that will lead. No, again, I fortunately did have levers to lash out in the sense of doing something about it. But boy, the fear, I can only now work for myself at this point in my life, although I loved collaborating with people. But yeah, there's nothing more nervy. I say this to men watching, listening, how happy you are in your career, how good and we're not career counselors here, but it's if there's something out of alignment, there's
mhm.
that word again, suppressing those emotions because, oh my God, my family member will hate me or this person will hate me if I make it. It's the reason why I reacted to your wife's comment and why it's all about men. Sorry for teeing this up here. Men seeking freedom is, I want to get to a place free to make decisions that are responsible and not going to hurt people, but I want to be free to make decisions where, whether I use the word alignment or not, I'm gravitating towards something that I know may not be perfect, but it's going to work for me.
Yeah. I think that's important though for the situation to be able to work for you. And because if when we operate, to me, when we operate outside of a space that doesn't feel right to us, then that's when we tend to make a lot of our mistakes. I think one of the reasons that my wife said, "Hey, what do you want to do? What do you really want to?" She saw me operating outside of my space, and she knows that I'm an expressive person. She knows I'm a communicator. She knows that I really have to get out there. You're talking to somebody who I did speech and debate in high school. I wanted to be an actor at one point. I wanted to be a TV news anchor at one point. And I did stand-up comedy for a little while. I did all of these things, and all of it pointed to I have to express myself somehow. And so when she saw that I wasn't necessarily able to express myself the way I like to express myself, she realized that I was making decisions that just weren't working for me. And part of that was me thinking to myself, okay, you better do something responsible with your life. And it's almost as if some sort of performance isn't the responsible thing to do. So I was fooling myself a lot, I think. I was fooling myself into thinking that I had to do this thing. I had to show up every day where I wore a shirt and tie and all that other kind of stuff. God, Michael, do you know how much I hate wearing suits? I can't stand wearing suits. I mean, it I can't stand it. I'll do it if I have to, but
Know who you are.
it's not my favorite thing to do all the time. So she saw a lot of that, and I felt a lot of that, but I needed someone to say to me, you're working outside of your norm. You're working outside of what you really want to do. And I know that, excuse me, I know that we've talked a lot about my wife, but I think for men, it's just important for us to recognize that we need somebody to support us, whether that is a male friend or whether that is whether it's the parents, the siblings, the cousins, whatever, fraternity brother,
Could be a mentor, a
the
clergy
mentor,
person.
whoever it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, that person you latch on to at work, whoever it is. You really do have to have that person who is going to see you for who you are, and they're going to help you operate within that. I say this all the time that to me, success is a team sport. And so I think you have to figure out who's going to be on that team with you.
in wrapping up here, this has been fantastic, by the way. It's so nice to have somebody who's competent in communication and has such a great story. There's men listening who would love to be your level communicator. How about a couple of, regardless of whether it's related to their work, related to their relationship, whatever, family, a couple thoughts from you on simple ways to become a better communicator.
I think one way to be a better communicator is to be honest about what it is that you're thinking. You don't have to necessarily say it yet, but to be honest with yourself about what you're thinking. I think also to be cognizant of the fact that communication is a process. You have a sender, you have a message, you have the channel or the medium through which you send the message, and you have the receiver. Being cognizant of that can make someone a remarkable communicator because you start thinking about how you're going to send this message, and you start thinking about to whom you're sending this message. And I think for a man to be a better communicator, a lot of times is to think about to whom the message is going, and then to think about how the message is getting to that person. Because a lot of times we don't think about who the message receiver is. We just think about the message. Or no, we don't even think about the message. We think about us. We think about being the message sender because I'm saying it, so it should be good enough. But and then we get into this thing which this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about sometimes. We get to this thing where we start talking about honesty, and for whatever reason, not just men, but people, we love to align honesty with toxic behavior. for whatever reason, we think that the only time we're honest is when we say something really crappy to people. And it's so funny to me because it's if I tell say, hey man, I really like you, and it's just like, oh, okay. Nobody says, oh, that's a great honest comment. But if I say, oh, I can't stand that mother, blah, 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 it's like, oh, I like Eddie. He's honest.
He's candid.
And I'm just like, wait, I was also honest when I told that guy I love him. This is my man. I
Yeah,
love him. That's my dude.
that's good
So
honesty.
yeah, and it's so funny. But I think that when we become more cognizant of the message receiver and the way we send the message to people, then we can become much better communicators because we have to think about everybody who's in the mix.
Another subject for another podcast with you is an idea is think about what we've been suckered into to communicate with these days, texting.
Oh,
How about
don't even
how
get me
about
started.
another podcast will be Eddie Francis
Oh,
on how to even attempt to be a good communicator via the digital world where nothing can the context, the emotion. Oh, when you
mm,
sent this to me,
I thought,
I may text you something as innocent and don't even think about it, and
yep.
you get it, and you're like, "What is Lynch thinking about with the way
Oh
he
goodness.
worded that statement?"
So the last job I had, it was so funny. The last job I had, I told people I have a two email exchange maximum. Okay, maximum. If we are not clear on what's happening and two emails are exchanged and we're still not clear, I'm picking up the phone
Yeah.
because I'm not doing this with you all day. I'm like, because I know people, they will sit there and exchange emails for a couple of hours and still not be clear on what's happening because they misinterpreted probably the second email and they have to go all the way back through the string to resolve the issue. And I can't tell you how many problems I solved at work when after the second email, I said, okay, this is enough. Let me get on the phone and find out what was going on. And I called them and voila, we clear everything up.
It's amazing how that just that basic advice is worth a lot of money. Let's put it that way. Eddie, for the good people listening and watching today who are intrigued by your communication strategy work as well as your speaking, what's a good way for them to connect with you?
Oh, the first thing I would say is that if you're intrigued, I'm sorry to hear that. At least I can fool some of the people some of the time. No, seriously, the way to get in touch with me is go to my website, eddiefrancis.com. So I have contact forms there. I have a really difficult email address, eddie@eddiefrancis.com. And so you can contact
Slow
me
down, Eddie. I
one
gotta
of those
write this
two.
down
I
here.
know, let me slow down. EDDIE, not a whirlpool. EDDIE. So, yes, eddiefrancis.com, or you can email me, eddie@eddiefrancis.com. I'd love to hear from
Nice.
you.
As you can tell, the man, he's great, but he doesn't have a sense of humor. That's what you can tell about him.
Yeah,
Eddie, this has
I've
been
been told I need to work on that.
I, I'm biased here, but as a man, I've learned a lot in this conversation. Thank you very much. Love your approach. Love your life story. Please, everyone watching this, share with the men, other men in your life, or if you're a woman, the man you love. Those are the people we want to hear and see this. If you have any questions about men seeking freedom, using the spirit of Eddie's marketing grace, it's menseekingfreedom.com. I'll see you on the next episode.